Hello everyone and welcome to my channel Learning for Fun. Today we are going to take a look at another topic, that is counseling process. So you would have heard a lot about mental health. The government is paying a lot of attention on mental health, and by now you would have understood that in today's world counseling is gaining a lot of prominence and there is a lot of scope which is associated with it. And so, if you are also planning to become a counselor, in that case, this video will help you to understand the basic process of counseling. Of course, before we start with the counseling process, let's first pay attention to what exactly is counseling. Now, counseling is a process that is post problem. It's a process which is directed towards the discovery of the problem, an exploration into the problem by the client, and it ensures that the client must be able to grow. It is focused on the well-being of the client and the development of the client. It will not be much focused on the past, rather the focus will be onto the changes that we are expecting in the client to happen in the present. Having said that, let's take a look at the counseling process now. So, a basic counseling process will be divided into 4 stages. Stage 1 is about developing a relationship with the client. So, in this stage, we try to develop a relationship with the client, and we also try to clarify certain things like what is going to be the structure of the counseling process. We need to decide upon certain things, as in the time, the fees. We need to decide upon the achievable goals, the settings into which the counseling process will happen, as well as we also take the informed consent of the client. The second stage is the working in a relationship stage. So once the relationship is built, we should understand that counseling itself is a professional relationship that exists between the client and the counselor. And why is this relationship required? This relationship is required to overcome the problems that the client is facing. So it's a collaborative alliance which involves multi-focused responding. So we might be focused on to the client's problem from multiple angles over here, and from multiple disciplines we may have to look at the problems of the client. For example, you may have to pay attention to the cultural background of the client, the educational background of the client, the clinical history of the client. Okay, so when we are working in a relationship, it has to be multi-focused. We also need to have accurate empathy. So you need to empathize with the client. You should not make the client feel belittled, but you need to empathize with the client. And up to a certain extent, self-disclosure can also be permitted, wherein you can talk about your own experiences and the ways to overcome that you have adopted in your own personal life. So there is a self-disclosure which can be brought in. Now, immediacy is about the here and now. So, we have to focus on the present because that is what the aim of counseling process is. We are trying to bring about a change in the life of the client at present. So, you need not have to focus a lot on the past. And at times you may have to confront as well. So, you need to make the client aware about what they are doing right and what they are doing wrong in order to facilitate the change, because change will happen only when you know that what requires a change. So if this discovery is not there, if you do not make the client to confront the behavior which is expected to change, you cannot expect change to happen. Now, stage 3 is termination. That is the end of the professional relationship. When do we do this? We do this once the goals are met and the client can now function independently. So the client has developed a potential to face the problems by themselves, and they have become independent. They do not require the presence of the counselor. The last stage is follow up, and follow up is scheduled to evaluate the progress or to research the outcomes without taking responsibility from the client. So now client is still responsible for the behavior that they have shown, but we need to keep a check. We need to keep a tab on the progress that the client has shown, and that's what follow up is all about. However, this process of counseling is not just so simple, but is also affected by a number of factors affecting the process. So, the first one is the structure. So, whether we, that means the client as well as the counselor, understand the procedures, the time, the limits, the roles, the responsibilities that they have in a shared manner. So if this clarity is there, probably counseling process will be very easy, but if not, then it will be very difficult. Second is initiative is very important. Whether the client is motivated or they are reluctant or they are resistant. So if the client is willing, then it will be very easy. But if that's not the case, then the counselor has to manage the clients very effectively. So whether we are talking about a reluctant client who is unmotivated, not really interested to take up the counseling process, or we have a resistant client that is really not willing to face the pain of change, so they don't want to change. Okay, so they don't want to change at all, so they are unmotivated and they're also unwilling to face the pain of change. So if we are having such type of clients, in that case the counselor needs to manage. The setting must be private, quiet and comfortable. So a comfortable place where the entire process of counseling can proceed. Then we also need to have the SOLAR technique. Now SOLAR stands for something wherein S is squarely seated, O is open posture, L is leaning forward, E is eye contact, and R is relaxed. So when we have this technique applied to the client and we follow such a sitting arrangement, in that case the counseling process is likely to be effective. Also, when we talk about the clients, there are certain qualities which are expected in the client, and if you want your counseling process to be successful, in that case your client must have the qualities as in YAVIS. So YAVIS again stands for young, attractive, verbal, intelligent and successful. If your client has these qualities, in that case you can expect the best outcomes to happen in your counseling process. However, as we progress with the counseling, there are certain critical relationship dynamics which may start affecting. So the first is the core conditions that are required, and they were given by Carl Rogers. So they are unconditional positive regard. We must be very hopeful with the client. We must be very positive with the client. Okay, so if nobody is expecting a change in the client, you cannot say that you are a hopeless case and you will never change. You need to show an unconditional positive regard. The client must trust you. Okay, you also need to show accurate empathy. Now empathy is to put yourself in the shoes of others, and it's not that simple, but once you're empathizing, probably the relationship, the professional relationship that we are expecting will grow stronger, and this will affect your entire counseling process. And the third condition what Rogers had emphasized was congruence. So congruence is basically the genuineness. So what you say is what you do is what you think. Okay, so there has to be an integration of the three. That is what congruence is like. You need to be honest. in your behavior. You cannot say something and do something else. So that's what congruence is. So these core conditions definitely affect the dynamics of the counseling process, and there are two more things which may start affecting, that is transference and counter transference. So now what is transference? Transference is a condition in which the client starts projecting their beliefs and their emotions onto the counselor. Now they are not towards the counselor, meaning to say the feelings and emotions are not basically for the counselor, but they are getting transferred to the counselor. So there's transference. Okay. So the feelings are towards some other person, but just because the counselor is seated before the client, the same feelings will now get projected over the counselor. And when we talk about the counter transference process, this is the opposite. So it means that whatever is the feeling and emotion of the counselor, that gets projected over the client. And once that is getting projected over the client, again we can expect that there is some sort of dynamics happening in the professional relationship of the counselor as well as the client. So with this, I hope you have understood the process of counseling, and it will be helpful in you to become a better counselor in the future. So if you liked the video and you developed an understanding about the counseling process and the dynamics associated with it, which will help you in becoming a better counselor, and you got certain understanding about this entire thing, then please do subscribe my channel, like this video and share it with the friends who are aspiring to become counselors. Thank you.